this week's Midweek Message. I'm Brother Wayne. It is a wet and rainy day here in East Tennessee, but I'm glad that you've joined me for this Midweek Message. This last Sunday, I preached on a passage of Scripture that I think is one of my favorite passages probably in the Bible. It's Hebrews 12, 1 through 2, where it says, "Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is now seated at the right hand of the Father, the throne of God." One specific portion of this passage I want to kind of hone in on this morning, I guess you could say. And that is the portion of the passage that says that Jesus, for the joy that lay before him, endured the cross, despising the shame. Now, I don't know if you've ever stopped to think about how shameful of an event a crucifixion was. And Jesus' crucifixion especially. Most criminals who were sentenced to die on the cross weren't beaten beforehand and treated the way that Jesus was treated. Remember that Pilate had kind of in the back of his mind a plan to try to release Jesus, because Pilate didn't really think that Jesus was guilty of anything. And so Pilate had Jesus unmercifully beaten and scourged with a cat of nine tails, in a really horrific way, in the hopes that when he brought this beaten and broken down man back out to stand before the people, that they would see what had already been done, and that their desires for vindication or whatever it was would be appeased, and he'd be able to let Jesus go. But remember, that wasn't the case. When he brought Jesus out and he let the crowd choose between Jesus and Barabbas, who was a known criminal and murderer. I think another point that needs to be made there is that Pilate chose someone who the people, if they should have hated anybody, they should have hated Barabbas. So he was hoping that they would choose to let Jesus be freed instead of Barabbas. But his plans were pretty much laid to waste when the people demanded that Jesus be crucified. So I want you to consider the fact that Jesus endured punishment that would have been just punishment reserved for criminals, that was vicious but just short of death, prior to the real conviction of crucifixion, which was then meted out by the Roman government as a capital punishment. Normally, you only had one or the other of these. You didn't experience both. Jesus experienced both. Okay? So this was an extremely shameful experience for Jesus. Jesus, remember, had people spit in his face. Jesus had people mock him to his face. Jesus was stripped naked and scourged with a cat of nine tails, to the point that he was bleeding profusely, and as a matter of fact, many people actually died from these types of scourgings. And so this was a shameful experience in and of itself. Remember that the soldiers wrapped Jesus in a purple robe and put a staff in his hand, and remember the crown of thorns that they pressed onto his head, and they mocked him in a fake show of bowing to his royalty and all this kind of stuff. It was all mocking. All of this. And that even before he experienced the shame that was part of the cross. Hanging with criminals. As people would come by in these days, people were being crucified. People would throw things at people on the cross. Rotted food or trash, all kinds of filthy things, rocks, and there's nothing the people on the cross could do to get away from it all. They'd mock them and make fun of them. I've read before that the majority of people who were crucified on crosses were crucified naked, and so there you are, bare for all of the world to see. There's great shame in that. The Roman soldiers would have contributed their own amount of ridicule and mocking, abuse. And this was an event that for many people would go on for days. The Roman crucifixion was one of the most gruesome and torturous ways to die that has ever been invented. There, hung on that cross, you didn't necessarily bleed to death. What killed you was that you eventually suffocated. As you hung on the cross, you would have to push up by your legs to get a breath because of the way that you were hanging. So you'd push up to get a breath, and then you would, out of the pain in your feet, because your feet are nailed to the cross, the fatigue in your muscles, you would eventually collapse back down again and would not be able, as hanging there, you wouldn't be able to breathe. And so this was a process that would go on and on and on, and the stronger a person was, the longer they lasted on the cross. The more healthy a person was, the longer they lasted on the cross. That's why I remember at the end of the day, because it was the Sabbath was coming on and they didn't want to leave somebody hanging on the cross. Remember, the soldiers came around at the end of the day to break the thieves' legs that were on the cross. That way they couldn't push up anymore and they would suffocate faster. Remember that Jesus was already dead when this happened. Why was Jesus already dead? Jesus was already dead because of the exertion and the loss of blood that was brought about during that initial beating and scourging. These other guys didn't have to go through all of that. And so Jesus did go through all of that, and that's why he died so much sooner, is because he was half dead before he ever even made it to the cross. Such a shameful thing, crucifixion. And the writer of Hebrews says that Jesus endured all of that, right, for the joy that lay before him. In other words, Jesus knew what was coming on the other side of the cross. He knew what his reward was going to be. He knew that he was establishing salvation for all of mankind. He knew that resurrection was just around the corner. And he endured the cross because of what he knew was coming. But get this, the Bible very clearly says here that even though he endured the cross because of the joy that was coming, he nonetheless despised the cross's shame. He despised the shame. He knew the shame that he was going to go through. He knew how torturous this event was going to be. He knew how painful this event was going to be. And the whole time that he endured it, he despised it. I think this is so important for us to hear today, because some of us find ourselves in situations at times that we absolutely despise. And I want to tell you, it's okay to hate your situation. Another word for despise is hate, right? It's okay to hate the situation that you find yourself in. It's okay to despise the situation that you find yourself in. It's okay to not be happy with the situation that you find yourself in, especially if the situation that you find yourself in is one that is brought upon yourself by your faith, or by following Christ, or by doing what's right, maybe when everybody else is going the opposite direction. It's okay to despise those hard, tough, painful situations. It's okay to hate the place that you're in your life right now. It's okay. But you can still have joy, even in the midst of things that you hate, because you look forward to a reward that's on the other side. Remember, that is what Jesus did. It says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising its shame. I don't know what you're in right now, or what you're going through right now. I have been in some seasons of my life that I absolutely despised. I hated the things that were going on around me. I despised the things that were areas of struggle for me. I did not enjoy it in the least bit, but yet I could still have joy, because I had faith that season of life, that situation that I found myself in, was temporary, and that God was going to bring me out of that on the other side of it to a place of joy. And listen, even if our entire lives, and none of us live this way, this is an extreme hypothetical, even if your entire life is nothing but struggle and hardship and pain, you still can know, if you have a relationship with Jesus, you have faith in him, that you will have joy for all of eternity. So even if your whole life is filled with struggle and turmoil, if you despise everything for all of your life, you can still have joy knowing that this life is temporary, and your joy is coming for all of eternity, and your reward is going to be eternal. But listen, most of us don't even live in that kind of a situation. Our whole lives aren't bad. We just go through seasons that are bad. And I want to encourage you to remember that everything is temporary on this earth. That the struggles that you go through, they're not going to last forever. And God's going to bring you out on the other side. He's going to do things, even in the midst of your pain and suffering, that will make your life better in the long run. Those times that I look back on, and that in the middle of I despised so much, I had so much disdain for, those are some of the times that I grew the most in my faith. And so when I look back on them now, I wouldn't want to go through them again by any means. But I'm thankful that God carried me through those times, because he taught me valuable lessons, and he did things in my life that drew me closer to him, increased my faith, and actually resulted in me having more joy in the long run. And so whatever you're going through, I guess what I'm telling you today is, you don't have to like your situation. But even in the midst of your horrible situation, even in the midst of things that you hate, things that you despise, things that do not make you happy, you can still have great joy, knowing, number one, that God's going to bring you out of this eventually, and there's going to be a reward that comes along with your patient endurance, and that eventually there's going to be an eternal reward. And so you can have great joy, even in the midst of things that you know, that you hate, because you know that God is faithful, and he's walking with you through the middle of all of that, and he's going to bring something great out of it in the end. When I read that passage of scripture for probably the 40th or 50th time, Hebrews chapter 12, and it dawned upon me that Jesus endured because of the joy that was before him. But even as he was enduring, he despised the cross and despised the shame of the cross. You know, it really made me feel a lot better to know that I don't have to like everything that happens in my life. Jesus did not like everything that happened in his life, but yet he remained faithful. He endured because he had a future focus and an eternal perspective. And so that's what I want God to produce in me, is a future focus, an eternal perspective, so that even though I may be in a moment or in a time, something that I hate, something that I despise, I don't let that dictate the joy that I have or the peace that I have in my life. And I hope you'll do the same thing. Hey, know that I'm praying for you, and if there's something specific that you'd like for me to pray about, a specific issue, maybe you're going through one of these dark times that you're just despising it and hating it, and you're saying, hey, I'd like for you to pray about this, feel free to contact us. Contact me through our YouTube account, or you can leave a comment below, and be happy to pray for you and to lift you up during this time. Don't give up hope, and let your joy be dependent upon an eternal perspective, not upon what's going on around you right now. Hey, I hope this has been an encouraging word to you, and I'll see you next time on the Midweek Message. And until that time, pray that God will bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.